What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel for another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. I want to apologize for not getting this out yesterday. Obviously, this series usually comes out on Mondays, but something came up and I didn't have time to post a video on both channels, but better late than never. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. Even the ones that don't get featured in the video, just know I read every single one and I appreciate all of you. And lastly, if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content like this all year long, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers in 2023, so every subscription counts. So with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and get this week's episode started with the first question from Thylacine, who says, if you were to create more trophies for awards, which would they be and what would you call them? Whenever something like this comes up, I usually have two answers. Those are Defensive Player of the Year awards, so this would be awarded to the league's best defensive defenseman. I feel like they don't get a lot of love when it comes to the Norris Trophy, so they could get their own award. The next would be the Most Improved Player Award. This is one of my favorite awards in the NBA. I think it's a really fun race every year, and you never know who could be involved. Last season, I feel like a guy like Tage Thompson could have taken home that award if there was one. And I'll throw out a third one, the Comeback Player of the Year award. I believe the NFL has this. So say if a player misses an entire year with an injury and then they come back and play really well in their next year, or maybe a player has a couple of bad seasons in a row, it looks like their career is kind of falling off, and then they have a big comeback year. So I think an award like that could be a lot of fun. As far as the names go for the award, I can't really think of any off the top of my head, like who they would be named after, but those are the main ones that I'd want the NHL to add if they were to add any. The next question we have comes from Connor McDrysaddle, who says, with Colorado not being in a playoff spot currently, do you think it is time to start worrying for them? Also, really appreciate the support. I'm really not all that worried about the Avalanche. Yes, they are outside of a playoff spot currently, but they're only 2 points back of Calgary for that second wildcard spot, and they have 3 games in hand, and they're also just 1 point back of Minnesota for third place in the Central. And the Avs have won 5 games in a row. They've looked really good as of late, and they're still not even close to 100%. Josh Manson is out, Bowen Byram's out, obviously Landeskog hasn't played yet this season. I think Cale Makar isn't playing tonight. As long as they can just stay in the hunt up until they get most of those guys back, which will probably happen sometime after the All-Star break, then they should be fine. And I think even with all those guys out with injuries, this team is still more than capable of winning enough games to not fall out of the race. Moving on now, this next question comes from Astro Wraith, who says, I've always liked the idea of shifting the point system in the NHL to be 3 points for a win, 2 points for an OT win, and 1 point for an OT loss. Personally, I think it would reward better teams who win in regulation and limit games going to OT because teams settle for a point. What are your thoughts on such a format, and do you think the NHL would ever consider adopting? Also, really appreciate the support. I'm glad you're liking the second channel. This is a really intriguing idea. You're right, it definitely would help separate the best teams in the league who win most of their games in regulation. As far as would the NHL ever be open to doing something like this, I'm not sure. There's no way to really tell. Me personally though, as a fan, I would certainly be open to the NHL trying something like this. I'd give it a chance for sure, and hey, if it doesn't work out the way you want it to, if it's not well received by the fans, you can always go back to the old format. The next question we have comes from the name you can see on the screen. Not even going to try to pronounce that, but thank you for the question. And the question is, what's your favorite music artist? And also really appreciate the support. So I listen to a pretty big variety of music. The only genre I really don't like is heavy metal. It's just not my thing. I listen to country, rap, pop, classical music. I would say country's probably my favorite though, so some of my favorite artists would be Luke Combs, Bailey Zimmerman, Morgan Wallen. I like Ed Sheeran as well. I mix in some Taylor Swift here and there. I like listening to Bon Jovi's biggest hits, so I'm definitely not that picky when it comes to music. This next question comes from Keegan, who says, can you see a scenario where Toronto uses Muzzin's cap space, 5.6 mil, to go after a bigger target at the deadline? Muzzin is on LTIR, and it's unknown if he will return this season. Does Dubas make a move using that money to help the Leafs? If so, who could you see Toronto potentially targeting? And really appreciate the support. That's definitely something I'm expecting the Leafs to do. I think they're going to be very active at the trade deadline, and it's almost a given at this point that Jake Muzzin is not going to return this season, and it sounds like there's a chance he may never even play again, which is a real shame. As far as who the Leafs could target, it sounds like they're really interested in defenseman Jake McCabe of the Chicago Blackhawks, who I think would be a really nice addition for the Maple Leafs. He's an underrated two-way defenseman, but it sounds like the cost would be quite significant, especially if you want to get him at salary retention, or with salary retention, I should say. So I don't think the Leafs should go out and overpay for a guy like that, because their defense has looked good this season, especially after the addition of Connor Timmins. He added some depth to that blue line. It's no secret that the Maple Leafs need a second line left winger, so I definitely expect them to go out and try to attempt to fill that void. It's been rumored that they're interested in Timo Meier, which is really interesting, but I'm not sure how likely that is, because that would almost certainly be like a blockbuster trade. That would really be the Leafs swinging for the fences. The big upside to making a move like that is obviously Timo Meier is great, but he'd be a long-term option at that position. He wouldn't just be a rental. Another guy that I thought would be a pretty good fit for that Leafs second line is Anthony Duclair of the Florida Panthers, who's looking like he's ready to come back from injury, but Florida can't activate him until they clear some cap space. So I could definitely see a scenario where instead of clearing the cap space to activate him, Florida just decides to move Anthony Duclair. Had a career year last season, probably wouldn't cost a ton to acquire this year considering the fact that he hasn't played a game yet. Now, even if the Panthers were looking to move Duclair, would they even consider trading him to a playoff team in their division like the Maple Leafs? Who knows, but that's definitely a name that I would keep an eye on, because I think he'd be a really good fit on the Leafs for what they currently need. The next question we have comes from a user who says, who do you think makes the jump to the NHL after the end of the NCAA season? And really appreciate the kind words. Definitely an interesting question. This is something that happens every year. Obviously, some of the big names last year, Kent Johnson, Matty Beniers, Owen Power, they come over, play usually about between 5 and 9 games, not enough to burn a year their ELC, finish out the season with their NHL club to just kind of get a taste of what playing in the NHL is like, to give them some experience heading into their rookie season. A couple of guys that I think we could see do that this season. One would be Logan Cooley, Arizona's 3rd overall pick from 2022. He's got 31 points in 25 games this season for the University of Minnesota. I could definitely see Arizona wanting to give him a look when his season ends. Another guy, a team that we just talked about, the Maple Leafs, Matthew Knies, the Leafs' top prospect. He's been point per game for the University of Minnesota the past 2 seasons. He's actually Logan Cooley's teammate, and he's a left winger. Like I just said, the Leafs are looking for a second line left winger. If they don't go out and address that need at the deadline, maybe a guy like Matthew Knies could come in and help after his season ends and potentially even suit up for them in the playoffs. One more guy I'll mention as a Red Wings fan, a player I'm pretty excited about, is Carter Mazur, a 3rd round pick by the Red Wings in 2021. He's got 17 goals in 26 games this season to lead the University of Denver. He's somebody that I expect to make the jump to playing professionally next season, so maybe the Red Wings want to give him a look to finish out this season. Next up, this question comes from John, who says, what is your opinion on the Dylan Larkin contract situation and how recent reports say that Larkin's camp was unimpressed by the Red Wings' latest offer? Do you think Larkin will be a Red Wing next season, or do you think Yzerman moves on from him? Also, really appreciate the support. I'm not even gonna lie, as a Red Wings fan, at this point in the season, I'm pretty worried about the whole situation. There was actually a report today, I'm not sure how credible this is, but it's according to Woodward Sports and Darren McCarty, who's obviously a former Red Wing. The report is Steve Yzerman will not budge in regards to negotiating Dylan Larkin's contract extension, and Yzerman would let Larkin walk. That last part is why I'm pretty skeptical on the credibility of this report, because letting him walk for nothing would just be a brainless decision. If you're Steve Yzerman and you don't think you can get an extension done, then I think the most logical thing to do would be to trade him before the deadline. Now, I think one way or the other, losing Dylan Larkin would set the rebuild back at least a few years, because then that would just make the center position even weaker for Detroit, but at least if you trade him, you're probably going to get a pretty significant haul. There has been various reports that the Red Wings are interested in Bo Horvat, and I've heard a lot of Red Wings fans saying, oh, we can just replace Larkin with Horvat, but then the team would kind of just be in the same position. I honestly think Horvat would be a little bit of a downgrade over Larkin. Now, if you can get an extension done with Larkin and then still go out and get Bo Horvat, now we're talking. Now you have a really good 1-2 punch down the middle. But yeah, day after day, I'm getting more and more nervous about this. If we pass the trade deadline and Larkin's still a Red Wing and he doesn't have an extension, that's when I might hit the panic button, because then there's a strong possibility he could just leave for nothing. The next question we have comes from Benjamin, who says, do you think that the whole Caulfield surgery deal was done out of necessity, or is this the Habs pulling the plug on their season and entering the Bedard sweepstakes? This is something that I've seen a lot since it came out that Caulfield is going to miss the remainder of the season because he has to get surgery. However, I definitely don't buy into the fact that Montreal is doing this just to sideline Caulfield for the remainder of the season because he was playing too well. If Caulfield didn't need surgery, then I don't think he would have been getting surgery. Yeah, he was having an incredible season, but even with Caulfield in the lineup, I definitely still think this team was bad enough to be in the Bedard sweepstakes. Obviously, losing your top goal scorer and one of the best finishers in the league league helps and makes you a lot worse. But yeah, I don't buy the fact that Montreal did this on purpose or anything. If Caulfield didn't need surgery, I don't think he would have gotten surgery. The next question we have comes from You Don't Need to Know My Name, who says, hey, I have a question about your channel. How far did you originally think you could get with this whole YouTube thing, and do you have any plans to grow your channel even bigger in the future? And also really appreciate the support and you sticking with the channel for this long. So I definitely do have some big plans in the future, but as far as how far did I think this thing would get, I didn't think it would get far at all. I remember one day, like back in 2016, I think it was, when I started the channel, it was just me and a bunch of my friends in my living room playing PlayStation. I believe we were playing Black Ops 3 at the time, and we all decided, let's start YouTube channels. We posted some Black Ops videos. Like, believe it or not, my channel started out as a Call of Duty channel, and it was really just for fun. But out of all my friends who started channels, I was really the only one who kept trying at it, kept, you know, changing my style of videos, and then until I found uploading hockey content really worked for me, so I kept at that, and now here we are, which is pretty crazy. And yeah, the plans for the future, like once I hit 100,000 subscribers, I do plan on starting to have my face out there. My reason for that is because I want to start streaming a lot, like do watch parties for games every single night, have big streams at the draft, the trade deadline, that kind of thing. But I feel like doing it without a face cam, it's just not near as fun. It doesn't have probably the visual appeal for you guys as well, just like staring at a screen and hearing my voice. So that's something I want to do that I think could, you know, potentially help grow the channel. Also, I've really been enjoying making videos on the second channel. It's something I'm passionate about. I'm glad most of you guys have been liking it as well. So I'm hoping to eventually build that channel, maybe to be on par with this one. And now for the final question of this week's episode, this one comes from Gunner, who says, do you think Bruce will land another head coaching role before next season begins? If so, do you think any teams stick out as a potential fit? I'm gonna say no. I don't think Bruce gets any kind of job for the rest of this season. I mean, we're already over halfway through the year. I feel like he's probably just going to take the rest of the year off and then kind of assess his options in the off season. I do think ultimately next season likely he will be behind an NHL team's bench again, whether that's as a head coach, an assistant coach. He's very well respected around the league. The players love the guy, and Boudreau obviously still has the passion to do it. He doesn't want, you know, the whole ordeal with the Canucks to be the way he goes out. So I definitely think we're going to see Boudreau in the NHL again next season. So that is going to wrap up this week's episode of the Ask Me Anything series. Again, like I said at the beginning, huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. You guys make this series so much fun for me to do every single week. If you guys enjoyed and you want to see another episode next week, then be sure to drop a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all season long, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.